Section 1. To Grover Cleveland. Sir, your inaugural address is probably as honest, sensible, and consistent a one as that of any president within the last 50 years, or perhaps as any since the foundation of the government. If, therefore, it is false, absurd, self-contradictory, and ridiculous, it is not, as I think, because you are personally less honest, sensible, or consistent than your predecessors, but because the government itself, according to your own description of it, and according to the practical administration of it for nearly 100 years, is an utterly and palpably false, absurd, and criminal one. Such praises as you bestow upon it are, therefore, necessarily false, absurd, and ridiculous. Thus you describe it as a government pledged to do equal and exact justice to all men. Did you stop to think what that means? Evidently you did not, for nearly or quite all the rest of your address is in direct contradiction to it. Let me then remind you that justice is an immutable, natural principle, and not anything that can be made, unmade, or altered by any human power. It is also a subject of science and is to be learned like mathematics or any other science. It does not derive its authority from the commands, will, pleasure, or discretion of any possible combination of men, whether calling themselves a government or by any other name. It is also at all times and in all places the supreme law. And being everywhere and always the supreme law, it is necessarily everywhere and always the only law. Lawmakers, as they call themselves, can add nothing to it, nor take anything from it. Therefore all their laws, as they call them, that is, all the laws of their own making, have no color of authority or obligation. It is a falsehood to call them laws, for there is nothing in them that either creates men's duties or rights, or enlightens them as to their duties or rights. There is consequently nothing binding or obligatory about them, and nobody is bound to take the least notice of them, unless it be to trample them under foot as usurpations. If they command men to do justice, they add nothing to men's obligation to do it, or to any man's right to enforce it. They are therefore mere idle wind, such as would be commands to consider the day as day, and the night as night. If they command or license any man to do injustice, they are criminal on their face. If they command any man to do anything which justice does not require him to do, they are simple, naked usurpations and tyrannies. If they forbid any man to do anything which justice would permit him to do, they are criminal invasions of his natural and rightful liberty. In whatever light, therefore, they are viewed, they are utterly destitute of everything like authority or obligation. They are all necessarily either the impudent, fraudulent, and criminal usurpations of tyrants, robbers, and murderers, or the senseless work of ignorant or thoughtless men who do not know, or certainly do not realize, what they are doing. This science of justice or natural law is the only science that tells us what are and what are not each man's natural, inherent, inalienable, individual rights as against any and all other men. And to say that any or all other men may rightfully compel him to obey any or all such other laws as they may see fit to make, is to say that he has no rights of his own, but is their subject, their property, and their slave. For the reasons now given, the simple maintenance of justice or natural law is plainly the one only purpose for which any coercive power, or anything bearing the name of government, has a right to exist. It is intrinsically just as false, absurd, ludicrous, and ridiculous to say that lawmakers, so-called, can invent and make any laws of their own, authoritatively fixing or declaring the rights of individuals, or that shall be in any manner authoritative or obligatory upon individuals, or that individuals may rightfully be compelled to obey, as it would be to say that they can invent and make such mathematics, chemistry, physiology, or other sciences as they see fit and rightfully compel individuals to conform all their actions to them, instead of conforming them to the mathematics, chemistry, physiology, or other sciences of nature. Lawmakers, as they call themselves, might just as well claim the right to abolish, by statute, the natural law of gravitation, the natural laws of light, heat, and electricity, and all the other natural laws of matter and mind, and institute laws of their own in the place of them, and compel conformity to them, as to claim the right to set aside the natural law of justice. and compel obedience to such other laws as they may see fit to manufacture and set up in its stead. Let me now ask you how you imagine that your so-called lawmakers can do equal and exact justice to all men by any so-called laws of their own making. If their laws command anything but justice, or forbid anything but injustice, they are themselves unjust and criminal. If they simply command justice and forbid injustice, they add nothing to the natural authority of justice or to men's obligation to obey it. It is, therefore, a simple impertinence and sheer impudence on their part to assume that their commands, as such, are of any authority whatever. It is also sheer impudence on their part to assume that their commands are at all necessary to teach other men what is, and what is not, justice. The science of justice is as open to be learned by all other men as by themselves, and it is, in general, so simple and easy to be learned that there is no need of and no place for any man or body of men to teach it, declare it, or command it on their own authority. For one or another of these reasons, therefore, each and every law, so-called, that 48 different Congresses have presumed to make within the last 96 years have been utterly destitute of all legitimate authority. That is to say, they have either been criminal, as commanding or licensing men to do what justice forbade them to do, or as forbidding them to do what justice would have permitted them to do, or else they have been superfluous, as adding nothing to men's knowledge of justice, or to their obligation to do justice, or abstain from injustice. What excuse, then, have you for attempting to enforce upon the people that great mass of superfluous or criminal laws, so-called, which ignorant and foolish, or impudent and criminal, men have for so many years been manufacturing and promulgating and enforcing in violation of justice and of all men's natural, inherent, and inalienable rights? Section 2. Perhaps you will say that there is no such science as that of justice. If you do say this, by what right or on what reason do you proclaim your intention to do equal and exact justice to all men? If there is no science of justice, how do you know that there is any such principle as justice? Or how do you know what is and what is not justice? If there is no science of justice, such as the people can learn and understand for themselves, why do you say anything about justice to them? Or why do you promise them any such thing as equal and exact justice if they do not know and are incapable of learning what justice is? Do you use this phrase to deceive those whom you look upon as being so ignorant, so destitute of reason, as to be deceived by idle, unmeaning words? If you do not, you are plainly bound to let us all know what you do mean by doing equal and exact justice to all men. I can assure you, sir, that a very large portion of the people of this country do not believe that the government is doing equal and exact justice to all men. And some persons are earnestly promulgating the idea that the government is not attempting to do, and has no intention of doing, anything like equal and exact justice to all men, that, on the contrary, it is knowingly, deliberately, and willfully doing an incalculable amount of injustice, that it has always been doing this in the past, and that it has no intention of doing anything else in the future, that it is a mere tool in the hands of a few ambitious, rapacious, and unprincipled men, that its purpose, in doing all this injustice, is to keep, so far as they can without driving the people to rebellion, all wealth and all political power in as few hands as possible, and that this injustice is the direct cause of all the widespread poverty, ignorance, and servitude among the great body of the people. Now, sir, I wish I could hope that you would do something to show that you are not a party to any such scheme as that, something to show that you are neither corrupt enough, nor blind enough, nor coward enough, to be made use of for any such purpose as that, something to show that when you profess your intention to do equal and exact justice to all men, you attach some real and definite meaning to your words. Until you do that, is it not plain that the people have a right to consider you a tyrant and the confederate and tool of tyrants, and to get rid of you as unceremoniously as they would of any other tyrant? Section 3. Sir, if any government is to be a rational, consistent, and honest one, it must evidently be based on some fundamental, immutable, eternal principle, such as every man may reasonably agree to, and such as every man may rightfully be compelled to abide by and obey. And the whole power of the government must be limited to the maintenance of that single principle. And that one principle is justice. There is no other principle that any man can rightfully enforce upon others, or ought to consent to have enforced against himself. Every man claims the protection of this principle for himself, whether he is willing to accord it to others or not. Yet such is the inconsistency of human nature that some men, in fact, many men, who will risk their lives for this principle, when their own liberty or property is at stake, will violate it in the most flagrant manner, if they can thereby obtain arbitrary power over the persons or property of others. We have seen this fact illustrated in this country through its whole history, especially during the last 100 years, and in the case of many of the most conspicuous persons. And their example and influence have been employed to pervert the whole character of the government. It is against such men that all others, who desire nothing but justice for themselves and are willing to unite to secure it for all others, must combine, if we are ever to have justice established for any. Section 4. It is self-evident that no number of men, by conspiring and calling themselves a government, can acquire any rights whatever over other men, or other men's property, which they had not before as individuals. And whenever any number of men, calling themselves a government, do anything to another man, or to his property, which they had no right to do as individuals, they thereby declare themselves trespassers, robbers, or murderers, according to the nature of their acts. Men, as individuals, may rightfully compel each other to obey this one law of justice. And it is the only law which any man can rightfully be compelled, by his fellow men, to obey. All other laws, it is optional with each man to obey, or not, as he may choose. But this one law of justice he may rightfully be compelled to obey, and all the force that is reasonably necessary to compel him may rightfully be used against him. But the right of every man to do anything and everything which justice does not forbid him to do is a natural, inherent, inalienable right. It is his right, as against any and all other men, whether they be many or few. It is a right indispensable to every man's highest happiness, and to every man's power of judging and determining for himself what will, and what will not, promote his happiness. Any restriction upon the exercise of this right is a restriction upon his rightful power of providing for and accomplishing his own well-being. Sir, these natural, inherent, inalienable, individual rights are sacred things. They are the only human rights. They are the only rights by which any man can protect his own property, liberty, or life against anyone who may be disposed to take it away. Consequently, they are not things that any set of either blockheads or villains, calling themselves a government, can rightfully take into their own hands and dispose of at their pleasure, as they have been accustomed to do in this, and in nearly or quite all other countries. Section 5. Sir, I repeat that individual rights are the only human rights. Legally speaking, there are no such things as public rights, as distinguished from individual rights. Legally speaking, there is no such creature or thing as the public. The term the public is an utterly vague and indefinite one, applied arbitrarily and at random to a greater or less number of individuals, each and every one of whom have their own separate, individual rights and none others. And the protection of these separate, individual rights is the one only legitimate purpose for which anything in the nature of a governing or coercive power has a right to exist. And these separate, individual rights all rest upon, and can be ascertained only by, the one science of justice. Legally speaking, the term public rights is as vague and indefinite as are the terms public health, public good, public welfare, and the like. It has no legal meaning, except when used to describe the separate, private, individual rights of a greater or less number of individuals. In so far as the separate, private, natural rights of individuals are secured, in just so far and no farther are the public rights secured. In so far as the separate, private, natural rights of individuals are disregarded or violated, in just so far are public rights disregarded or violated. Therefore, all the pretenses of so-called lawmakers that they are protecting public rights by violating private rights are sheer and utter contradictions and frauds. They are just as false and absurd as it would be to say that they are protecting the public health by arbitrarily poisoning and destroying the health of single individuals. The pretense of the lawmakers that they are promoting the public good by violating individual rights is just as false and absurd as is the pretense that they are protecting public rights by violating private rights. Sir, the greatest public good, of which any coercive power, calling itself a government or by any other name, is capable, is the protection of each and every individual in the quiet and peaceful enjoyment and exercise of all his own natural, inherent, inalienable, individual rights. This is a good that comes home to each and every individual of whom the public is composed. It is also a good which each and every one of these individuals composing the public can appreciate. It is a good for the loss of which governments can make no compensation whatever. It is a universal and impartial good of the highest importance to each and every human being, and not any such vague, false, and criminal thing as the lawmakers, when violating private rights, tell us they are trying to accomplish under the name of the public good. It is also the only equal and exact justice which you or anybody else are capable of securing or have any occasion to secure to any human being. Let but this equal and exact justice be secured to all men, and they will then be abundantly able to take care of themselves and secure their own highest good. Or, if anyone should ever chance to need anything more than this, he may safely trust to the voluntary kindness of his fellow men to supply it. It is one of those things not easily accounted for, that men who would scorn to do an injustice to a fellow man in a private transaction, who would scorn to usurp any arbitrary dominion over him or his property, who would be in the highest degree indignant if charged with any private injustice, and who, at a moment's warning, would take their lives in their hands to defend their own rights and redress their own wrongs, will, the moment they become members of what they call a government, assume that they are absolved from all principles and all obligations that were imperative upon them as individuals, will assume that they are invested with a right of arbitrary and irresponsible dominion over other men and other men's property. Yet they are doing this continually, and all the laws they make are based upon the assumption that they have now become invested with rights that are more than human, and that those on whom their laws are to operate have lost even their human rights. They seem to be utterly blind to the fact that the only reason there can be for their existence as a government is that they may protect those very rights which they before scrupulously respected, but which they now unscrupulously trample upon.